Hi there. My name is Cyan Quinn, and I'm the founder and director of the White Papers Policy Institute. We're a fast-growing team of policy analysts who love Western civilization and the unique people that created it. Today, some of these people groups are facing enormous pressure within their own countries as a result of mass migration and the ideology of multiculturalism. One example of this is South Africa, home to many ethnicities, not just black and white. There are 11 languages spoken across the country, and despite efforts to harmonize these peoples into a rainbow nation, we're instead witnessing extreme violence against the white minority and a collapsing infrastructure. South Africa shows us a glimpse into the future of the West if these trends continue. But thanks to President Trump's executive order addressing egregious actions of the Republic of South Africa, this situation is now getting international attention. The order withdrew support of the hopelessly corrupt ANC-led government and invites the white minority to seek asylum in the US, but many of them don't want to leave. This minority, the Afrikaners, are the descendants of Dutch explorers who came to South Africa in 1652 and developed the land. Their entire culture, their language, their faith, and their worldview is rooted in the land that they secured for themselves during the Great Trek. They see themselves not as individuals, but as members of a family with a strong attachment to their ancestors and to their land. So these people are extremely interesting to us, and we have a lot to learn. Today, I get to talk to two of the most inspiring Afrikaner leaders who will show us how they're harnessing that pioneering spirit of their forefathers to maintain optimism, creativity, and tenacity for survival. Let's welcome Dr. Ernst Roets of the Pioneer Initiative and Joost Strydom, the spokesman for Orania. Let's get started. Thought, we just wanted to make you feel a little bit at home.
We feel at home when we see trees and mountains.
What is South Africa like? Could you tell us a little bit about it?
South Africa is extremely diverse, and I think a little bit of the secret to understanding South Africa is to understand how vast it is. It's a big country. It's almost the size of Western Europe. So if you compare the Netherlands and Belgium to Italy or France to Germany, there's so much different natural perspectives and biomes. So South Africa is a very large country. So you've got semi-desert arid areas, as where Orania is located, and you get beautiful forests, you get the savannas, and you have beautiful oceans and beaches and so on. So Africa really is a tremendously beautiful country, and that's one of the reasons why we love our country so much, why it's so, it's not a place we want to leave.
Right.
We really love it.
Your story is incredibly interesting. I think the rest of the Western world can look at what you're doing, and the Afrikaners in particular, as an example of how to not only survive in these pressures, but thrive and think of new solutions to move forward.
Can I read you a quote on that? I have it here on my phone. It's a quote by Arnold Toynbee, the historian, who made a comment about exactly that. He said, my personal feeling is that the Afrikaner nation is confronted with a most difficult and at the same time most important spiritual task, which it is bound to undertake without having any choice of refusing. It seems to me that in South Africa, you are faced already with a situation that very soon is going to be the common situation of the whole world as a result of the annihilation of distance through the progress of our Western technology. There will never again be room in the world for the different nations or factions of mankind to retire into isolation from one another again. Now in South Africa, the accident of history has put the native, colored and white people of the country into this difficult situation at an early date. So history, or God, has given you the honorable mission of being the spiritual pioneers in trying to find the solution of a spiritual problem that is soon going to face the rest of the human race as well. So, which is a very striking remark, but I think it speaks a bit to what you said. You mentioned the languages. So yes, there are actually more than 11 languages. There are technically 12 official languages in South Africa, of which one is sign language. So without that, there are 11 official languages, but then there are other minority languages as well. So it links to the point that Joost made, that it's a very big country. It's very diverse in terms of climate, in terms of ecology, in terms of the people, demographics, and in terms of the nation. So I think one way to make sense of South Africa is to realize that South Africa as such is not just one big nation. It's a territory that is inhabited by a variety of nations. And it's because of this dynamic and the fact that it has often been misrepresented or misunderstood. I think this is a significant part of the reason why we have the problems we have today, and which is why we say the solution is about recognizing the diversity of nations living in South Africa and moving us closer towards some form of self-determination for these peoples who live in South Africa.
Just to add to that, if I could take the opportunity to just point out that if you understand South Africa as a construct, it's not very old. South Africa as one nation, as one so-called nation, has been created by the British Empire in 1910. So it's 115 years old, right? So before that, what was the reality on the ground? And that's specifically also the Orania way of understanding this territory. Ernst referred to a territory. That's what it is. It's the southern tip of Africa. And then the British gave it borders. So what was it before then? Well, there were colonial areas, which was in British hands and primarily inhabited by them. And then there were Afrikaner republics, multiple actually. Afrikaners love creating new republics. It's our thing. Two of them very successful, the Republic of the Free State and the Republic of the Transvaal, which became recognized countries upon themselves, and where our people lived and had economic relations and built things and so on. And then the Zulu and the Xhosa monarchies, which was traditional, with a king and so on, and also nomadic people who moved around. And all of these groups were forced into one construct. And we think the term the new South Africa is something that came with the change to the ANC government in the 90s. It was already used back in 1910, referring to a new South Africa. There's a new South Africa coming. So this new South Africa now forced everyone into this construct, and in order to rule over this, you have to align people with a single identity. That just doesn't work. That doesn't work economically. Yes, it works because whoever is in charge can economically guide things, and they can build railroads through people's territories and so on, so that the resources gets moved easily. There's no struggles in mining and harbors. Things like that is seen just as economic pursuits, but people's territories gets denied, and we lost that. We don't have a home anymore.
Dr. Roets, you've been discussing the incredible violence that's been committed against the Afrikaners and the land seizure by the South African government now for quite some time. I think your book, Kill the Boer, came out in 2018. Why is it that we're just now learning about the persecution of the Afrikaners in South Africa?
If I can say something about that is perhaps slightly more emotional or personal or psychological, it's we as the Afrikaner people have felt for decades now, probably half a century, that we were treated like pariahs, that no one wanted to come close to us, that it's almost like a stepchild that's sort of kicked out of the house. We regard ourselves as Westerners, and we often speak of and quote Samuel Huntington's The Clash of Civilizations. And actually in The Clash of Civilizations, he mentions the Afrikaner people. That book was published in 1996. And he says in the book that even though the Afrikaners view themselves as Westerners, the Western world has decided that they aren't Westerners, or they aren't part of the club, you could say. And which is really, it's like being kicked out of your family. And so we are very grateful about the fact that suddenly there's this sort of a rediscovery of the Afrikaner people, because for decades we really felt like we were alone. And so we're very happy and grateful about that. I think part of the reason, there are probably multiple reasons for that happening. One is technological, with the era of social media and the fact that the filters that are put on access to information by news editors are falling away. And people can just see directly on X or wherever what's happening. I think that's one part of it. Another part is we talk about the pendulum swinging. It has swung so far in a particular direction, and the direction was a narrative that said the Afrikaner people are horrible, evil people. The ANC, who's currently governing South Africa, are wonderful. They liberated South Africa. It had a very bad, oppressive history, and now South Africa is a free country. And it was a miracle that this has happened. And a lot of the world believed this for quite some time. And I think partly due to access to information, people are starting to discover that that's a lie, that it's not true. It's not even oversimplified. It's false. And so I think the pendulum has gone so far that it was just inevitable that at some point it had to swing back. And we are very grateful for that. We still get some pushback, and especially in some Western European countries, the people or institutions or parties more on the left would either deny these things that we are talking about. They would deny, for example, the farm killings happening, or in as far as they would acknowledge that it's happening, they would frame it more nuanced, or in a more sophisticated way. But the argument would be something like, well, you deserve it. And so we do get that, but what we are seeing is a sort of a rediscovery of the realities, or a discovery of the realities in South Africa, and a rediscovery of the Afrikaner people, and the fact that we are still there after all these years. And so I think it's a big window of opportunity for us.
For people who are just joining us, maybe they saw Trump's executive order addressing the egregious actions of the Republic of South Africa, and they're just now finding out about the plight of the Afrikaners. Describe for them what kind of persecution they're facing now, and what efforts exist now in South Africa to preserve yourselves in your country.
So the question of the persecution is, there's almost too much to say, but it manifests in a variety of ways. One is the race laws. So in America you have a term DEI. The buzzword in South Africa is BEE. It's Black Economic Empowerment. So interesting, in South Africa the gender stuff isn't as extreme as in America, but the race stuff is, in some ways, at least the way it's imposed by the government, is worse. So it's called Black Economic Empowerment, but it's not by any stretch of the imagination a policy aimed at empowering black people. It's aimed at making them dependent on the government. And so that has gotten to the point where the South African government just keeps writing one race law after the other. And so we now have one study found that there are about 144 race laws in South Africa at the moment, which categorizes people according to skin color, and then in some way dictates how that should determine how you are treated, how you should be treated by the government, but also in private companies and so forth. And all of it is discriminatory, of course, towards the white minority. So that's one aspect thereof. Another aspect is the violence. Now, white people or Afrikaners are definitely not unique in the sense that we are the only ones targeted, or we are not the only victims of violence in South Africa. There are a lot of black townships in South Africa that really, really suffer under violence, especially gang-related violence. Our unique problem is the farm killings, which is really, really, really horrible in terms of just the frequency thereof, how often it happens, the brutality thereof, and so forth. But what makes this phenomenon unique and different from all the others is that it's actively encouraged by politicians. And so it's almost unimaginable to think that we have a problem of people being tortured and killed largely on a race basis. It's not exclusively a racial phenomenon, but the perpetrators are well, there's been some attempts to quantify the racial dynamics, and the perpetrators are black, but the victims are mostly white. And so there's definitely a racial dynamic to that. And it's not just killing people, it's torturing people. And now on top of that, we have politicians within the ruling party and other parties actively encouraging it, or ridiculing the phenomenon, blaming the victims, chanting "kill the boer, kill the farmer." And then when they get asked about this on an international stage, they would deny the existence of the problem. They would just say, it's not happening. It's all a lie. It's not happening at all. or they would try to justify it. They would basically say, well, those people had it coming. And so that is really, really, really alarming. And those are just a few variables in which we are very concerned about the future of our community.
This is highly concerning to us because what we're seeing in South Africa is kind of that philosophy, but played out once that particular ethnic group gains power over the white minority.
So let me say something about that, and I'm sure Joost can add. I think one thing that people in America should understand is it never ends. So there's this idea that maybe we should just back down on this particular issue, and then they'll, that's the end of it, or maybe we should just give them this, or just abandon this particular issue, and then we'll all be happy and it'll be sorted. But it never ends. It's like the metaphor of the frog in boiling water. The water just gets warmer and warmer. That's the one thing. And the other thing is, don't think that once you become a demographic minority, that's the end of it. That then it becomes more aggressive. That's what we saw in South Africa. So we're a minority. And the argument, if you are the majority, the argument is we need to implement these racial categories or these DEI initiatives to protect minorities. That's the argument you would hear in America. We need to protect minorities. In South Africa, it's flipped. In South Africa, it is we need to protect the majority from the minority, or from minorities. And then it's even worse, because then the argument is these people are minorities, but they have disproportional wealth, and what they have is disproportional. So it's even more of a grotesque thing. It's even worse. And so the aggressiveness with which policies, you could say DEI policies, gets implemented against minorities is much worse than when those targeted are the majority. And I think people in America should recognize this, that don't think we should just give away certain things and then it's sorted out. It's worsening the situation. Because if there's a difference between the haves and the have-nots, and the haves are a minority, they are in bigger trouble and in bigger danger than if they are a majority. And this is not an attempt to be alarmist, but all the big atrocities against minorities over the last century were always committed against minorities who had some economic power that the majority didn't have, whether we're talking about the Jews in Nazi Germany or the Tutsis in Rwanda. You can go down that list. It's always, and so our challenge is that we're a minority that is easily identifiable. We're a minority that is, you could say, wealthy, or in terms of economic income, we are better off than the average, and but we're also a discredited minority, and it's not politically incorrect to target us, and so that's a dangerous combination: being discredited, being on average wealthier, and being easily identifiable. And that's something that, again, that people in the West should take note of.
You referenced Samuel Huntington earlier, and I think that book is really incredible and also visionary in predicting what is to come and breaking down cultures along the lines of civilization, because one of the mistakes I think that we make as Westerners is we assign this charitable view towards ethnic groups that are in our nations, but maybe they don't have the same value or the same culture. And I mean, it's almost a form of intellectual imperialism in a way. Like, we're just projecting the way we think and our democratic values and the way that we function in our civilizations on peoples who maybe don't share those.
No, well, I think just to add to that is to say that I think you referred to intellectual imperialism, but it is kind of the liberal sentiment, liberal imperialism of thinking if they could just be like us, everyone would be happy. Mm-hmm. That's actually extremely racist, extremely, that's Islamophobic, if you want to call it that, or whatever. But just to equate everyone to your worldview, the idea that your culture is so normal that it's the absence of culture. You've dropped this antiqued notions that there's something like culture. You just, through liberalism, you reach this peak, and then everyone should embrace that, and then we will all be happy, and so on. It's just blatantly untrue. But more than that, also very dangerous, because it also doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. And as we said earlier, demographics is destiny. Whatever those demographics might be, if it's a difference between McDonald's eaters and KFC eaters, or whatever, what sports team you support, or whatever, the idea that there's two groups and one is the majority, they will dictate the dominant culture. So the problem with having this liberal inclination to intellectual imperialism is that no one else will follow that. Right. Whoever becomes the majority will push down their values on the rest. So whether that be whatever belief system or religion or just demographics. So I think that's something that we learned very quickly in South Africa, and we are a minority, but we're also a people upon ourselves. We are a in English the word nation works. In Afrikaans we would use Volk, or a people, but we are a group with the right to exist and not be prosecuted and not have all those things, and that leads you to the logical conclusion that we also need a home. I think that's the Orania standpoint. We need a home.
We talk about Huntington a lot, and his thesis is also a response to what Joost said, because in the 1990s, when the South African Constitution was written, everyone was caught up in this end of history idea that we have now reached the pinnacle of human development, which is liberalism, and the final solution is liberal democracy. And that has to be applied to South Africa. So we take
the end of history.
Yeah. We just take this big territory with all these different nations, and we just give them individual rights, and then everything will be okay. That was sort of the argument. And again, like you said, it's very intellectually also, you mentioned this, intellectually imperialistic. We have the solution and we're just going to impose that on you, and then it's going to work. Right. And Huntington was critical of that, which is why he wrote The Clash of Civilizations, to say the future conflict in the future would not be so on economic differences and so forth. It would be primarily civilizational. And then he lists the big civilizations like the Western civilization and Islamic and so forth. But interesting, there's also some criticism towards Huntington, which I think is useful, among others by someone like Roger Scruton. And so the one criticism is that I don't think it's so valid, because Huntington does sort of cater for this in some way. But the one criticism is we must not think of civilizations as static, they're just sort of on the same level, and because some have developed to a further extent and some are less developed, you could say economically and so forth, or scientifically in terms of building cities and so forth. But being more developed is not necessarily a good thing, because that also could mean that you are closer to decline or to collapse. So that's one aspect thereof. And so the one argument is that Western civilization, you could say, has been more developed, but that's also why it has more problems internally. But the other argument that I think is important, and that's what Roger Scruton mentions, is that it might be an oversimplification to say that what we see in the world is just a clash between civilizations, because for a clash of civilizations to exist, the different parties have to be interested in the notion of civilization in the first place. When a lot of what we experience, and I have to say I think what we can see happening in America and in Europe, is that there are at least some people or some groups who are just anti-civilization in principle. They just want to destroy the notion of civilization. And we have that as well. So there's a dynamic of the clash between civilizations, but then also a good example would be the Olympic Games, the French, the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games.
Oh, yeah.
And that, in many ways, was just anti-civilization. And what was interesting to me about that was how many people who aren't Christians, who aren't Westerners, who live all over the world, were really upset about that opening ceremony. You had people in Asia, people in Africa, people who aren't Christians, Muslims, you saw that as well. Because a lot of people felt that what's happening now is just people trying to destroy the idea of civilization. And so I think that the reason why I mention this is the struggle that we are in South Africa, but I think also in America and in the West, is some part of it is for the preservation of your civilization and recognizing that there are civilizations or cultures that think differently. That doesn't make them wrong, it just means that they have a different cultural perspective. That's one aspect thereof, and finding a balance. But then the other side of this is recognizing that there are people who are just hell-bent on destruction, and they want to destroy the notion of civilization, they want to destroy the notion of religion, the notion of culture, and somehow believing, I don't know if they really believe this, but at least arguing that we would all be happy if we achieve this. And so I think we need to balance these two things.
And this kind of ties back into, I think, the issue of South Africa, where Donald Trump and the U.S. has offered AU asylum, but you are so connected to the land, and this is really inspirational. You know, I want to hear more about your stories. I know that you've been there for generations. I mean, ever since the founding, and I'd like to hear more from you as well.
For longer than me, his family.
Yeah, my great-grandfather arrived in 1677, so that's 100 years before the Declaration of Independence here in the US. So that's the amount of time that our forefathers spent there. So we don't really have another home, and we were speaking about this earlier, that we can't go anywhere else. We can't go anywhere else, and we can go there as individuals. We can go there for economic prosperity or for safety, but we can't go anywhere else and be who we are. It's not something you can just transfer, uproot yourself and just plant yourself again. Yes, you can live in another place, you can survive, you can even economically thrive, but it doesn't mean that you continue to exist as what you are, specifically over generations. If we were to move to the US in 3 generations, the kids would be Americans. So I think that's also kind of a vision to Westerners in the West, being caught up in bad situations. I think of our dear friends in Western Europe, whether that be in England or in Belgium or in wherever where the governments has just lost their minds collectively, and where we can see that the policies they're pushing through is so authoritarian and so completely insane. They are also losing now their individual freedoms and feeling like they should uproot themselves and go somewhere else. Maybe that's the answer, but I don't think so. I don't think that you can continue to be a Flemish person just elsewhere. Yes, you can have a good life, you can have a safe life, you can have maybe a individually more free life, and you can economically thrive, but you will stop being something that your ancestors were for a very long time. You will lose that identity. And whereas South Africa is in many ways a warning, canary in the coal mine for Westerners about their future, unfolding in real time, when demographics and liberalism and communism meet into one big so-called melting pot, I think in that fashion we can also say, well, we're testing out some of the solutions, as we started in the introduction with. We are pioneering some of the first possible ways to work around this. Should I go? Should I stay? Should I move? Should I should I vote? What should I do? And I think we as Afrikaners got some answers to that.
If I can add, the just with reference to that quote by Toynbee I read, he speaks about the annihilation of distance, and that it wouldn't be possible in future to withdraw into what you could say enclaves where there's no distance anymore. I think the wrong lesson to take from that is partly what has been tried in South Africa, is to say, let's then pretend that there aren't differences between communities or peoples, and so let's just, like the South African attempted solution was, let's just give individual rights to all these nations, and then they would somehow flourish. I think the appropriate way to respond to a comment like that is to say we need to find a way in which communities can continue to be communities, can continue to preserve their culture and live life in their unique way, and celebrate their cultural events, celebrate their history, but in a way which is not isolation, but that is in mutual recognition and respect with other communities. So cooperation between communities, we believe, is the way forward, as opposed to trying to dissolve communities. And so there's a lot to be said about
just to interrupt there, that notion is extremely important with a very, very big, etiquette on that, and that is to say it must be voluntarily. So what we have now, especially in the West, is this kind of forced integration. Just integrate and you will be happy. The moment any state or any authority forces something, it tends to be a major problem. You have to go back to a point where you say, well, let's get some distance and make that decision yourself, with whom you want to interact and in which fashion. And without that voluntarily exchange, forced exchange is always leads to more conflict, because it's to the disadvantage of someone.
Well, this leads back to the question of the validity of the social contract. Is the social contract really valid if you are born into it and you can't leave?
Yeah, but I think that the social contract thing has really shaped the way the world thinks. This idea, which is of course completely abstract, that theoretically we came together and we drew up this contract between ourselves and the government, and the government. So what happens? South Africa is a good example. The government's not abiding by the social contract, because the contract says, to really make it practical, we pay taxes and we abide by the law. So we give certain things, and in exchange we should get certain things. But what happens when you have this so-called social contract, and you abide by your part of the contract, but the other party is breaking the agreement, is breaking the contract, is not protecting your life, liberty, and property? Do you have the option to step out of the social contract or not? And so the problem is, this idea of the social contract is a good argument up to a point. And then the question is, what happens when it's not working? What happens when the one party is breaking the agreement? So theoretically, you could now say, in South Africa especially, and I think in many other places in the world, the one party is breaking the agreement because it's not doing what it's supposed to do according to the contract. The question is, can we step out? And that's when it becomes difficult. And I think that's part of what we need to do in South Africa. And when I say step out, we say that we need to, there's going to be some form of political or dispensational change in South Africa. And we need to work towards a system that is more sustainable, in which the government doesn't have the authority or the power to just break the agreement, or just not fulfilling its obligations or its duties or responsibilities towards the citizens with no consequences. There needs to be some form of change, and I think we're already going in that direction, but we need to make sure that it's a good change and not a bad change.
Now, you just launched a new initiative called the Pioneer Initiative. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, and also if the viewers are interested in becoming involved with that, we'd really welcome that. So it was, the idea was to launch it almost as a shell, very, very deliberately in a preconceived way, so that we can start getting input and then consider that in shaping this initiative into something that would be a more final version. So we still need to talk, for example, about the name. Are we going to change the name at some point? We have a broad policy framework, but we're working on that. We're doing research. We're getting research from people. But and so we're sort of in the few months ahead, we're going to shape this into something that's a bit more tangible. But what's quite exciting about this, not just in terms of the support that we're getting from all over the world, it's really exciting. How many emails we've gotten and contributions from Americans, from people in Europe, people in Australia, people in Africa, all the continents. I don't know if we've had from Antarctica yet, but
there is a research team down there right now.
Okay, well, we'll reach out to them and then we can say all the continents. But the main point is to say that the South African system isn't working. It's going to change. We're not even saying it has to change. We're just saying it's going to change, because it's inevitable that it's going to change.
It is happening right now.
It's already changing.
It's very unstable.
Yes, and so what we are saying is we need to find something that is more sustainable. And the two words we use for now, we might, when we have sort of spoken about this and had some workshops, we might just change our vocabulary a bit. But for now, the two buzzwords you could say is, the one is decentralization, We need a system in which the central government has much less power, not just in theory, but also in practice. And the other word is self-governance, is for local communities to be able to govern themselves. And a community can be different things. It can be regional communities, it can be cultural communities, it can be a lot of things. South Africa certainly has regional dynamics, with even among the Afrikaner people, those who live up in the north are a bit different than those who live in the south of South Africa. There's some cultural dynamics, and America is a good example of that as well. When a country is big, there's cultural differences, but so we have regional dynamics, but the cultural dynamics are especially important, because within a cultural community, there are certain things that you share. So the Afrikaners up in the north and the Afrikaners down in the south still has a shared culture, and a shared view, even though there might be nuanced differences, a shared view of how we got here, and in many ways a shared history, shared ancestry, and so forth. And so the current system just flat out ignores those realities. It pretends that they don't exist. And the people who wrote the Constitution spoke about this, saying that the argument was, and it's a very popular liberal argument, or a very popular individualistic argument, is to say that any community consists of individuals. So if the individual is protected, by implication, the community is protected. And South Africa has shown that that's not the case. You can give the individual all the individual rights he needs or she needs, and then as a result of that, the community can be under a lot of stress, or even dissolve or disappear eventually, because there's no protection for the community. And maybe let me just give a practical argument or example of that. Mother tongue education. So we have, in South Africa, as an individual, you have the right to study in the language of your choice, in as far as it is practical. And so you have a right to study in Afrikaans, which is our language. But as a community, we don't have the right to institutions that provide education in Afrikaans, in our language. So you don't have the right to the institution, but if the institution exists, you as an individual can study in your language. So what happens in practice is you have that right, but the institutions get taken away because the community doesn't have a right to have an institution. And so
how did that institution get taken away?
They just changed the language policy. So they take Afrikaans, for example, away as a medium of instruction. And then you as an individual, even though you have the right, they would say, well, it's not practical because we don't have that language at this institution. So you can't force the entire institution to include that language. And so eventually you lose your language because it's lost from your institutions. And and there are many other examples, but simply guaranteeing individual rights does not protect the community. And especially not, again, in a territory like South Africa that is so big and so diverse. It puts a lot of pressure on communities. And so the way forward, again, and this goes to the Pioneer Initiative, is to say that we need to find a broader political system in which communities have much more, not just protection, because it's not just about being protected from or by the government, but in which communities can flourish, in which they can be free to build their own institutions and have it protected and be involved in solutions for their community, and then cooperate with other communities and working together.
I'm curious if you're finding any cooperation with other ethnic groups too.
Well, I think Orania has some good examples of cooperation with other groups.
There is a qualifier, and I would say you use the words to make everyone happy. I don't think that's possible. That's also not our kind of outlet from the beginning. Our aim, our focus is to serve Afrikaner interests and to make sure that our people have a home and so on and so on. However, building that, putting resources and plans and material and time and effort and so on into what we do, we also say, well, this can also be a solution for other groups. It can be a solution. Use it. Use it. We don't have resources to share for two reasons. Firstly, because we simply don't have them. And secondly, because we believe that sharing resources in just in an open manner is denying people the opportunity to develop through the stages that we had to go through in terms of making plans how to serve your community and so on. So resources is not something that should just be given in a way. There should be learning independence. Independence is not something you just take You must learn it and then live it. But we have many models, our own banking system, our own local medium of exchange, often referred to as a currency, but it's a medium of exchange. Our own institutions in safety and security, in community institutions and so on. So if you build all those things and you design all those things, and some work and some don't, and you refine the process, you get to a point where you can say, well, this works, you can use it, you're welcome to use it. And we found a connection to other communities who's got the same needs and looking for the same solutions that started using those models, including black communities in South Africa, the Xhosa people of Mnyameni, the Barulong people, and so on and so on. So I think Orania stands very strongly on this thing that we are not trying to be everything for everyone. It's not what we are. We have a specific focus, we have a specific goal, and we are glad that other communities can benefit out of some of the lessons that we learned. I think that's kind of the principle. But our focus is for Afrikaners, our planning, the way that we envision our future, the way that we order our local little civilization. It's in our ways, but then yet again inviting people to participate, using our models as a blueprint elsewhere.
Right. So for people who are new to the who are just learning about Orania and your independent cultural community, can you explain to them the history of how it began and how it's developed and how you've been able to have this independence and safety?
Yeah, very shortly. We spoke about how big and vast South Africa is. So Afrikaners' problem is not that we are minority people. Our problem is that we are spread very thinly around South Africa. So everywhere there's Afrikaners, but also everywhere Afrikaners is a minority, which has got cultural implications, it's got safety implications, it's got political implications, economic implications, and so on. So Orania's answer to that is, in order to survive long term as a people, we need to concentrate on one place. We call it concentration politics. Mass relocation to a specific area makes you the majority in that area. So we chose very specifically the least populated area in South Africa, which is the Karoo. For those not familiar, it's a semi-desert area. It's very arid and dry, very undeveloped. And because there's almost no one else and it's undeveloped, we can then settle there and develop something from the ground up. So Orania was, the idea was envisioned as early as the 60s and 70s. A formal organization came to be in 1988, and Orania as a ghost town was brought in 91. And from there the community was growing. Now it is a community with a stable population growth of about 10% yearly. It's got about 3,000 full-time inhabitants and about 6,000 or 7,000 more supporting members of the Orania movement. It has built its own bank, its own chamber of commerce, two high schools, a college now hosting more than 200 students studying in Afrikaans, surrounded by Afrikaners, where they learn skills which is accredited nationally and even internationally. It's built its own safety and security structures. It liaises with government on all three levels in order to keep ensuring our right to exist, although we firmly believe that realities are created. You create a de facto reality, you put that down, and from there you get the de jure recognition for what you are. And that's basically Orania.
What you've been putting out on social media is very impressive. I read that you just instituted your first public transport. I think that's really exciting. This is all happening within a relatively short time frame. It's only been a little over 30 years. And I say that short. Some of our listeners may think, well, oh wow, 30 years. Well,
but if you think of it in terms of civilizations, not in terms of individual lives, it's not a long time in terms of civilization, in terms of making a mind shift, a people making a mind shift. You have to make certain moves in your mind, relocating to an area that, 30 years ago, moving to the desert, it seemed very undesirable. But now, as it's growing, as infrastructure is developing, as opportunities are arising, it seems much more attractive. but you had to have that full vision, that you know, to understand that we need to do this, this, and this to get this, and this as effects.
Maybe if I can add, I think 30 years ago, the Orania idea was a much more strange idea than it is today. And I could even say it was a much more unpopular idea, just because 30 years ago, again, it was the end of history. The Berlin Wall has fallen, and the belief was capitalism won and liberalism won, and the new South Africa, this miracle story, people believed it and thought and hoped that it would work. And now so back then the idea or having the foresight that the founders of Orania had to say, well, we're just concerned that maybe it's not going to work, so we need to start working on an alternative. A lot of people found it's unnecessary and it's a waste of time and energy and so forth. And now people are starting to realize that this big ideological project that they had bought into, which is the new South Africa, isn't working, it's failing. And we need to look at different solutions. And so especially in the last few years, a lot of people, I think Orania, have gotten a lot of support from Afrikaners, from people in South Africa and from abroad. And you can really see that trajectory. It's significant how it's changing.
Yeah, and I think another thing to understand is that in the transition period in the 90s, many Afrikaners said, okay, let's make South Africa work. We're in this together, let's make it work, you know. So many Afrikaners also embraced this idea of a new South Africa and to uphold it, and played actually a fundamental role in upholding this construct of a new South Africa, you know, whether that be through the institutions of the country, through state mechanisms, for just embracing what it is. So the time for Orania, you know, one of the founders of Orania said there's nothing as strong as an idea whose time has come to be, for which the time is ripe. And Orania is now moving into that territory. So yes, our short-term goal is to grow from town to city, and to just, you know, construct the infrastructure necessary for that. But in the end, it's about territorial. It's about a territory. It's about being a majority in a larger territory. It doesn't stop with the idea that we just have a small city and we're happy. You know, we need a national home for our people.
Now, when did you move to Orania?
1995.
And what made you decide, I'm going to move to...
I was forced, actually. I didn't have much of a say in the matter. I moved there with my parents as a small child, and they moved there from the province in South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal. So we moved there where it was still a ghost town, and there was no economy, there was nothing. People who moved there at that stage purely moved for intellectual reasons. It was typically professors, archaeologists, lawyers, doctors, things like that, who could envision the future. All of them, 95% of them got impoverished and lost a lot of their wealth because they moved to a space without an economy. There was nothing there. You had to build everything from the ground up. So it had its ups and downs, but there was only the idea to live for. And going through that, it's you know, it's not easy. It's not easy for people to stay committed to the cause. But as Orania grows, the growth is not linear but exponential. Mm-hmm. So suddenly, when businesses start multiplying and economy starts growing, it happens faster and faster. And we entering that era now. We're kicking off the pioneer dust from our feet. Not this pioneer, the pioneer community. The new town, you know, that pioneering spirit. It's not the spirit, but the economic realities. We are leaving those behind and entering a new phase of accelerated growth, which is very exciting, much more comfortable than it used to be, although we still have that uncomfortability of the unpredictability of South Africa, as well as the uncomfortability of knowing in what dire situation our people are in the rest of South Africa, knowing that we have to build for them as well, so that they have a place that they can come to. Not all of them will come, not all of them want to come, but many would like to have that option, and that's why we build with the understanding that we are not we are in a pretty empty area. We are not taking rights away from anyone else. Actually, Orania's definition of freedom is not being ruled over, by oppressors or foreigners, but also not ruling over others. We are not imperialistically minded. We're not colonially minded. We want to decide our own future. We don't want to, rule over others. But also to say that we're not oppressing anyone in our territory, and we don't want Afrikaners living outside Orania to be oppressed in any fashion. In order to have a place, you need to have a demographic majority in a geographical area. There is no other way. If you don't have that, and I think many Americans and Europeans don't understand that yet, because they still have majority areas. They still even majority in their own states, although their governments seem oppressive and do weird things. They still are a majority, so they feel safe. But the moment you lose that, you lose a lot of things. You really, it's downhill from there. And to understand that, you must establish areas where you can be a majority. The majority of Afrikaners live in Pretoria, but in Pretoria, Afrikaners are not a majority. A minority of Afrikaners lives in Orania, but in Orania, Afrikaners are a majority. So you have to understand the dynamic between that.
Well, maybe if I could just add to that, I think that is part of the reason why we think the West, the Western world, and people all over the world should take note of what's happening in South Africa and should contribute, because the solutions, in some ways, we are experiencing problems that much of the world might still experience in the future, and we're trying to find solutions for those problems. For the problem, for example, of what do you do when you become a minority in your own country and those in power actively start discriminating against you more aggressively and so forth. How do you find solutions to that? And so South Africa is, I don't want to say a petri dish, some people have said that, but it provides the opportunity to work towards solutions that might be very important for the rest of the world in future. And so we really do, that's why we chose the word pioneer and why it came out several times in this conversation. We really think of ourselves as, in some ways, in uncharted territory and having to be pioneers. But there's a bit of a paradox in that, because even though we regard this as uncharted territory and pioneers and we find new solutions, we're not ideological. And so we are, in a certain sense, anti-ideological. And so we find that the solutions we need to find are actually old solutions. We need to return to old solutions, and we need to apply them in a modern context. And the principle, for example, of self-governance is an old solution. It's not something that someone made up, writing some new philosophical approach. And so, which is why we're also very traditional and conservative, and we look to our Western tradition, and we look to the Roman Republic, for example, and we look to what did the Greeks do, and we look to the Bible, and we look to old solutions as old as that, but also during the course of Western civilization. And one of the sources we find very useful is a book like Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote about how the Americans during the 1800s had to find their own solutions within the context of the community. And if you have a problem, you build an institution, or you build your own school. You don't ask the government to build you a school. Yeah. So we're in a new context with new technology and all of this, but the solutions, much of the solutions are the same, and that's quite exciting that we can sort of implement these old solutions in a modern context.
Relearn them in a certain extent. You have to relearn things, because many of that ways of thinking are lost, because people have grown so dependent on government, so dependent on bigger authorities, that it's in their history, it's in their culture, but they've lost it personally over the last 2-3 generations. It's just gone. So you need to relearn, and the moment you can relearn it quick, although uncomfortable. It's possible to relearn it quick, because it is kind of the basis of the civilization that we are part of.
You said that you're not an ideological group, or you're not an ideological community. You referenced in another one of your interviews how the American diplomat visiting Rwanda, was witnessing the Rwandan genocide, but they it felt like they couldn't say anything because, well, we just built this beautiful new democracy, and how, you know, there's parallel.
Celebrating the fact that Rwanda was becoming a democracy was more important than speaking out against the genocide that was happening in Rwanda. I have another less dramatic story on that. Last year, when I was in New York, I spoke with someone who's a blogger or an author. He writes on, I think, on Substack. And we had a very fascinating conversation. He's a young guy, he's a student, and he's very involved with politics. And he describes himself as I think he said libertarian, but it's a liberal, and sort of the conservative side of liberalism. And he spoke about individualism and sort of the liberal John Locke and these ideas. And we started talking about what's happening in the world. And I was teasing him a bit. And I said, look, what you're saying sounds great, but you do know that it doesn't work. And I was actually surprised by his answer. He said, yes, I know, and it's tearing me apart.
Oh no, it's tearing me apart.
Yeah. So I mean, it was sort of a facetious conversation, but the concern with that was he was saying that I have chosen my ideology, and I'm committed to this. And in as far as I find that reality is something else, it upsets me because I have chosen my ideology, and so reality has to comply with my ideology and not the other way around. and so, but look, no one can really escape ideology because we're all ideological in a certain sense. But the problem happens when you choose an ideology and you say this ideology is the solution. And a lot of people have done that in recent years, this sort of rise of the libertarian idea. And then people so you see it's a problem when people start defining themselves according to an ideology. It's like, who are you?
Right.
And then the person says, I'm a libertarian. And even that's also a risk with conservative. I mean, we're conservatives, but that's not our identity. Our identity is not that we have chosen an ideology called conservatism, and now there's some debate as to whether conservatism is an ideology at all. And so we like to make the distinction between natural identity and artificial identity. So natural identity just comes from the nature of things or the way things are. Like a culture is natural. People just naturally develop culture.
Right.
And so your language and your religion, these things are natural. It just it sprouts from human nature. Artificial identity is when you write some ideas in a book and then you think, well, this is the solution. So
right.
an ideology
and then you try to force that onto the world.
Yes, exactly. And so ideologies, especially modern ideologies, are example. But a lot of what's happening in America with these new, we would say then, artificial communities popping up and that becoming someone's identity then. So we have these, like the trans community. It's sort of a new thing. And so people have decided that's the community of which I'm a member, but it's an artificial community. It's not a natural community. And another interesting, and I know this is a controversial topic, but an interesting phenomenon is the view people take on the war in Ukraine, where there's an interesting thing happening with people who have abandoned their own identities or their own nations or communities, and then they take up another one. And then so you see it with people whose profile pic, they would be Americans or South Africans or wherever, but then their profile picture on social media is the Ukrainian flag. It's as if they don't associate with their own flag anymore, but they have a need to be part of something, and so they choose something else. And so maybe choosing another flag might be that flag might be natural to some people, but it's not natural to you if that's not your flag. But this phenomenon of people looking for identity is I think it's a symptom of the world that has become very anti-identity over the last few years. And so the thing is just we need to say what is natural and what is unnatural. And it's not sustainable to choose something that is not natural as your identity.
I've heard somewhere you're in a metal band. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes, it's true.
He's a metalhead.
Yeah. But that's not my identity.
Right.
It's maybe one part of it, but yeah. No, it's exactly right. And I think, again, so because also it's not sustainable. So choosing something as your identity, whether that is an ideology or whether that is something that someone made up, or people saying their religion is the Force, the Jedi. There's this thing in England, some poll found that there's a bunch of people in England who their religion is is Jediism or something like that.
Oh.
I mean, that's something that someone wrote. George Lucas invented it, and
That's
then
funny.
and now some people have adopted that as their religion. Maybe that was a joke, but yeah, I mean, you can say things like that, and it's great and it's interesting, but it's not sustainable. And so the sustainable way is to look at what is just naturally who you are, and try to preserve that, especially when that thing that is natural is under attack by the thing that is unnatural. And that's, I think, in many ways, the core of the fight that we're all in at the moment is artificial things are waging war on natural things, and we need to stand up for what is natural.
I think a good test also, especially as a bit of advice for reactionary groups, especially on the right, is to be very careful in times of controversy such as these. It's very easy to imagine just a quick fix kind of abracadabra and everything is perfect solution. It's from Orania side, I must warn that is not true, and there's no such solutions. We've learned it the hard way, but projecting an ideology in which you believe specifically, I see it specifically very much on the reactionary right, to think we must implement this, and this, and everything's going to be fine. And I now use this system or this system as kind of to project that. How can't they see these very simple solutions? Yes, there are some simple solutions that are complex to execute. There are simple things, but through an ideological set of glasses, or too ideological, let me phrase it that way, because I think Orania is also to some extent ideologically framed. Thinking you have this system and you just need 2 or 3 good guys to just implement it, and we're going to keep all our comfort and everything's going to be simple and all the problems will go away. It's kind of a test, I think, if you think that your system is just going to solve everything. No. Realities are built. That's the Orania thing to say. Freedom is built. Realities are built. It is a complex and tough process to build such realities. It's not a snap off the finger solution kind of thing. Be careful. People who propagate their solutions as a quick fix, as an ideological quick fix, they are dangerous because they disregard everyone else for something specific, and they will disregard you very quickly as well. Yes, there are certain things that must be done and so on, but still it's built from the ground up. It's built. We must keep people enthusiastic and positive while simultaneously retaining the idea that there's no shortcuts. You need to build.
Maybe if I can add to that, well, 2 quotes. One that I really like, or 2 quotes that I really like. One is by your former president, Theodore Roosevelt, who had that famous "it's not the critic that counts" line, which I'm not going to try to recite, but essentially saying that, well, from today's perspective, we can say it's easy to find solutions when you're behind a keyboard or when you're making a tweet, but when you actually have to go out and build it, it's difficult. And the other one is Jan Smuts, who was this Afrikaner general, eventually became prime minister, and he was involved with the United Nations, and he was somewhat of a controversial figure in our community because he was sort of a globalist, but he was also an intellectual. And so during the First World War, he spoke in the British Parliament, and he was helping Churchill. He was sort of an advisor to Churchill in the war, during the Second World War. And he made a speech, and he was leaning towards, it was just as sort of the tide was shifting, and he was leaning towards starting to talk about practical things happening in the war, as I said, in London. And then he stopped and he said, "But rest assured, I'm not going to start talking about the strategy for the war right now." He said, "I'm going to leave that for the amateur strategists, because they have more freedom to say what they want and less responsibility to live with the consequences of what they say." So,
Right.
and the thing is, it's very easy to chant certain things or to demand certain things or to state certain things as the solution. But when you actually have to implement them, it's a bit more difficult, and you run into oftentimes muddy waters, and you have to find it. How do I navigate through this? And there's something exciting about that. And again, this is why Orania is such an exciting project or initiative. It's a tangible solution that is being built, and it's not that simple. It's based on what we said, rediscovery of old truths, but But in the process of building this and achieving this, you have to make difficult decisions, and you have to navigate through difficult waters, and that's the only way through.
Now I'm curious, because it's taken so long to get to this point, and you essentially grew up there. What are some of the experiences you had as a child? Are you grateful for that experience, for growing up there?
It's a long conversation, but I think first thing I can think of is obviously there's economic reality, especially in the early Orania, so things like that. And but the positive out of that is learning to make do, and being dependent on one another in the community. Second thing is the constant need to explain a very nuanced kind of standpoint. Orania wasn't very popular in the 90s, even under other Afrikaners. They thought, you know, kind of people trying to bottle the past and stay in it. People longing back to the previous dispensation. They're quite, you know, you can't associate with such people. So the ability to have nuance in your approach in explaining Orania, and specifically also with the amount of media attention Orania got from little kids age, we had to explain what Orania is and why we are there and so on. So I think that's a positive thing. It makes you very aware. It's a very good education in understanding who you are, how you fit in, how you position yourself and so on. So understanding kind of the larger position where you are in as a people and the specific solution that's spearheading it from a young age, I think it's really worth something. It opens a world for you that many other kids just live and they're just oblivious to it. So I think that was very nice. This is a bit of a romanticism to the early Orania years. We did a lot of exciting things. Everything was new and exciting, and the little bits of progress was celebrated, and so on. So that was really good. And then it set a good platform, a good foundation for the currently growing Orania as well.
Maybe can you say something about the whole idea of self-reliance and growing up with that frame of reference as opposed to Afrikaners growing up in Pretoria, for example?
I think we were just denied the resources of the state in a very rural area, just in practical sense. Example that we always use is to say the police didn't really, in rural areas in South Africa, there's a very big, there's not really police services available. It's just too vast, too empty, and too far. The medical services were an issue and so on. So that mindset, if, for example, if there's a fire, there's no fire department coming to put it out. The people need to do it themselves. And learning that is still the case in Orania, but now we are the ones building the infrastructure. Even in fires or crime or whatever in areas outside of Orania, Orania's infrastructure and people tend to react to that because there's no one else to do it. We have access to certain things, whether that be jaws of life, a very small volunteer fire department, safety and security, and so on. So we have the options of servicing a larger area, de facto projecting our abilities on the larger area because there's no one else doing it. If you're in an accident, I can't just call a paramedic or an ambulance and they come because they weren't there.
You can do that now because it's grown. Yeah.
But I mean, in Orania, if you call a ambulance from the closest city, they will take 2 hours to arrive. So the people of Orania had to build that infrastructure, paramedics, ambulances, and so on. And now they're helping people around Orania, farms surrounding Orania, and so on. So I think that changes a lot of perspective.
And there's a pride that goes along with that self-sufficiency too.
It's a way of thinking that develops.
Yeah.
You need to be involved. There's no option of not being involved. Whether you're involved with the school or the church or the Chamber of Commerce or safety and security or fire or whatever, you need to be involved in something. Everyone in Orania needs to be a volunteer. And people who just don't do that, they tend not to last very long in Orania. They tend not to build friend groups and stuff like that, newcomers. So you need to be involved in some way. It's not a requirement, but it is a requirement.
It's a way of life, yeah. So you say some people, they come in there and they might not last very long.
Absolutely. I think Ernst spoke about natural alignment of identity. It's a shift to make. You understand, to embrace own labor, to embrace own institutions, to embrace the economic reality. Still, in Orania, you need to make a mind shift, which is tough, and you need to You need to embrace the community. As I said, Orania is not trying to be everything for everyone. So you need to kind of fit in and embrace that. I think that's not easy for everyone. There are still, you know, we refer to like in the Bible, there's the saying of the food of Egypt. Some people just wants to go back and eat the food of Egypt again, you know, being in that
Right.
the big pots of Egypt. It's not always easy, but once you embrace it and you become part of it, it's really exciting, and people live very fulfilling and happy lives then. But it is sometimes uncomfortable.
So there's a famous saying or belief that more or less goes along the lines of that a community needs a shared enemy or a common enemy to survive, to be a unity. And if you don't have a common enemy, then people dissolve or they lose their sense of unity. I think that is it's true, but it's also oversimplified, because it doesn't necessarily have to be an actual enemy. It could be a common obstacle that has to be overcome. And I think Orania is a good example of that. I don't think, and Joost can correct me, but I don't think Orania thinks of their existence as having enemies that need to be destroyed, but rather that there are certain obstacles that need to be overcome for the community to flourish. And there's a lot, so I think it would be good for us also in the West, in the broad sense of the word, not so much to think in terms of enemies that ought to be destroyed. And you hear that a lot on the right. People say we need to go and destroy this and destroy that. And sometimes they are enemies. Sometimes there are people who are really out to destroy you. But first and foremost, I think if we think in terms of obstacles that need to be overcome, there's also a lot of that also leads to unity within the community. And again, Orania is a good example of that.
So that reminds me of a question that we got from the listeners and the readers and subscribers. And so if you don't mind, I'm just going to grab my phone here and read off some of them. We actually have a lot of interest in the entrance process and application process for becoming a member of Orania. And one question is, are whites of British background and culture accepted in Orania or just Afrikaners? This person is clearly familiar with the history between the English and the Boer.
So to understand this, we must start from a starting point, and the question is, what is Orania? Orania is a home for Afrikaners. Why? Because we took the initiative to start building something when we saw a dire need. Now, if we reduce Orania to be as wide as possible, it loses its specific purpose. Then it's not a place for Afrikaners, it's not a home for Afrikaners, then it becomes very, very reduced, you know, to reduce it to just having a white skin would completely eradicate just our history. Currently under the ANC government, it's not the first time Afrikaners and Afrikaans is under threat. It was very much under threat from the British government as well. Now, this is not an issue of trying to get back at them or trying to do something like that. It's to understand that if there's another dominant culture, you can actually die out or be just become part of the more dominant culture. So under the British, we suffered in terms of language and culture and so on as well. So Orania is to create a home for Afrikaners, right? So if that's the starting point, Afrikaans, our language, our religion, our culture, our practices and so on must be preserved. Not only preserved, but also built out. And that's kind of the starting point. It's not an issue of denying an individual person, whether he be an Italian or a Greek or a British person or an American, the right to come to Orania. It is to say Orania's goal is to preserve Afrikaner heritage and to take it into the future in a dynamic way. So I think it's the exception that proves the rule. There are British people who've integrated into the Afrikanerdom and to Orania also, but it is the exception. It's not the rule. We always say, we even said it to ANC officials who tried to test our systems, everyone is welcome to apply. The application process is you know, open. We can send you the application papers, but you have to go through the process, both through the process of right to residency, the orientation program, and the final step is if the community accepts you. If you, for example, a far left transgender person forcing your way through legal manners, maneuvering in a fashion that Orania cannot deny you because we are still under the jurisdiction of South Africa and the government can force us to integrate you. The final test is still if the community accepts you. So you can maybe cheat the system, but you can't cheat the people. The people need to accept you. And that's, I think, the most natural way to live. Between people who accept you or do not accept you, and then you don't maybe feel welcome. You can force your way through our systems. We don't deny that it's possible to yield state machinery against our systems, although it was tested and found to be not illegal in any way. On the highest level, the Human Rights Commission of South Africa tested our systems. They couldn't find anything wrong with it. However, even if you could yield state machinery against it and cheat it, it's still the people. And that's why Orania is such a natural occurrence in terms of identity, as we spoke about. If the people don't accept you, you won't feel welcome.
This is something that just came across my radar that I'm more interested in researching. But a friend of mine said that in order for him to buy a house in Switzerland, in his particular municipality, he had to fill out basically like a college entrance essay.
So just want to expand on that. That's maybe the European way of doing it. In Africa, you're just pushed out of a community if they don't like you. It's very practical. If you do things, and we see these shocking videos of people, if it's a criminal, they get beat to death sometimes. You see these shocking videos from South Africa and people getting stoned or light on fire. It's very extreme examples.
Right.
But it's just the community saying, well, this rapist or this criminal is welcome, and this is how we're going to deal with it. So the Swiss way is more, college level essays. In Africa, it's just a reality. If you're not welcome here, you're not welcome here, kind of thing. In specific communities, I'm not speaking on national level, I'm speaking on community kind of levels. So there's a very practical kind of way in that. And it's not necessarily a once-off thing whether your essay gets accepted or you get, thrown with stones. It's also over time. Do people do business with you? How do they interact with you? Do you experience friendship? Do you feel welcome? Things like that. It's not so strictly quantifiable. And we spoke about kind of the reactionary right with these once-off policy solutions to things. Things are much more natural if it's on a community level. It's over time. Things happen over time. There might come someone into the community who's antagonistic against Orania, and it takes a year, and they naturally fade out again. And we've seen it so many times. Ernst brother actually have a saying, Orania is what is an ambeeld in English?
Anvil.
Orania is the anvil on which many a hammer has been broken. You get these big hammers and they want to do this and they want to do that, and they keep hitting, and then the hammer just fades and the anvil is still working. So much more than just hardline policies, the way that people dictate environments is also very important.
I think it's interesting too that you get all this international media pressure for being they call you racists for having your own your own community, but you're actually very open and welcoming people. There was an interesting story that you had mentioned at some point of Julius Malema, the guy who's chanting "Kill the Boer," had a visit to Orania. How did that go?
I tried to make a point, try to show the world he can go anywhere into the heart of the Afrikaners. I think the words that he used in the media. And our answer to that was, he published it very publicly in the media saying, I'm going to Orania without speaking to us. I'm going to show the world I will go there. And your first reaction is very, opposing, saying, especially Afrikaners, they can be people that gets very, very stubborn in handling, treating them like that. And we just thought about it for a second, say, what is his goal with this kind of sentiment? Well, his goal is to get media attention, to make a big statement. And the last thing that someone like that would expect is being invited in. So the moment he came here, there was no one stopping him. He came in, showed him the community. Something that really surprised him is that Orania is not this kind of super rich Afrikaner hideaway place. It's much rather a very real place where Afrikaners live from different economic realities, and where the people that live there earn their daily bread by hard work through grace from above. But it's not this glamorous kind of rich neighborhood where people exploit people in other places and just hoard their money there. And he was quite surprised to see that. But I think more importantly, the thing was to show, well, here you are. What now, Mr. Malema? You didn't get the gated kind of stop and, you know, the big fight in the media and the big television cameras and everything. It's just a normal community doing quite normal things, although it seems extremist because of the big shifts that it creates and the political space that it opens up. It's just normal people. And it's very tough to say something against Orania if you were treated in a very polite and good manner. And then we said, listen, you are here now. You brought the media with. Let's sit down and have a media conference. And we used that to also explain the Orania model. I don't think it was the reaction he was hoping for. I don't think it's what he envisioned. And he had to leave again without really being able to maneuver on Orania, without really being able to say something. And he left us in peace for 15 years after that. Back then, Orania had a population of, I think, 600 people. We were very vulnerable and fragile. We've grown, you know, we're 6 times as big, almost 5 times as big in the meantime. So we are stronger now and so on. But the pragmatic way of not reacting emotionally to things like that opens up the opportunity to create space for yourself.
This leads into another question from our members, and that is on the issue of safety. How do you in Orania stay safe, and how does that compare to communities outside Orania, say in Pretoria?
Yeah, well, you go first and then I'll add.
Orania, what I can say about Orania is, firstly, if you can't depend on the state, the community learns to be vigilant. I always say we have 2 very good generals in Orania. It's General Distance and General Own Labor. So that keeps us very safe, you know. Making that 2 decisions to go away from the big metropolitan areas and then do your own work, those 2 contributing factors is very important. The third one would to have good relations. We don't go out challenging Julius Malema and the likes for no reason, because the safety of our people is very important. But one must remember, Orania's goal is not safety. Orania's goal is freedom. Dangerous freedom is better than you know, safe tyranny. So freedom first. If we are free, we will be safe. If we can make our own decisions, we can be safe. So it's own labor, it's distance and geographical location, and then the fact that we choose to have good relations as far as possible. And then comes actual safety and security decisions. Many people want to start with the hard kind of approach, the hard stuff. Our approach is that's the basis, and then a vigilant community, building safety and security structures from the ground up, which we are doing. We have a registered professional legal security company in which we also empower a lot of the volunteers to get training, to register formally. And it's not something that we project as being paramilitary and so on. We go through the legal routes, and there are many available, thanks to also you know, other legal agencies in South Africa breaking ground to make sure citizens have the right to protect themselves. Create the reality, we go the legal route, and we make sure that people really empower themselves through those means to make sure they can defend themselves.
Just in terms of the safety situation in the rest of the country, this is one of the areas in which the South African government has largely collapsed. The government's supposed to keep you safe, but it isn't. And so the police, unfortunately, have become very corrupt and very unreliable, up to the point where if you're in trouble, you don't call the police, because they probably won't answer the phone. Or if they do, they will probably tell you that they're not coming out, or they will have some problem, like they will say something like, we don't have a vehicle to come and help you, or something like that. So everyone in South Africa has their own stories of problems with the police. And so we have no other choice than to find communal solutions. And so Joost mentioned some of the violence that we sometimes see, the vigilante justice we sometimes see in the townships, where there's a rapist living in the township and people know who the rapist is and the police isn't doing anything. And so eventually the people just sort it out themselves. They either kill the person or kick him out. And that's not what we do. It's not an Afrikaner thing. So, but it does happen in some communities in South Africa. What we are doing to keep ourselves safe is, again, to build institutions to make sure that those, and this is the great thing also of a communal approach to solutions, is people have different interests and different talents. And so in any given community, if it's big enough, you will find a significant section of the community who is very interested in safety related issues or firearms and training and so forth. And so those people should be able to use their talents in that way by keeping the people safe. And that's what we do, is we have these community institutions, we drive patrols, we communicate with each other through radio contact, we do training. You make sure that you are armed, you are able to protect yourself if you are in trouble. And that's the way to do it. Some people, if they can afford it, they live in gated communities where you have to go through private security to get into the community where you stay, which makes it much more difficult for criminals to come in. Everyone can't afford it. So if you can't afford it, you have to be in touch with your neighbors and your community to be able to protect you.
How is our community lifestyles different, and are you more connected? Are you watching out for the kids at school?
So we are very proud of our women also, because it just as part of our history, women have played a very big role in the Great Track when we moved into the interior and in the wars that we fought, and many of our women were killed as a result of the concentration camps. And so, at least in our community, the Afrikaner women are very involved and very strong. That doesn't mean that they aren't feminine or that they are more masculine. It's not that, but women are also very involved with, for example, the safety initiatives. In terms of a healthcare approach, for example, or responding as paramedics and so forth. So we have a lot of support in that. But also we have this joke in the school that my children go to, that the real security guards are the moms, the mothers, looking after the school. A lot of mothers work, some don't, but the idea of dropping off your kids so we have 2 coffee shops, that's at least at the school that my children go to, on both sides of the school, and then the parents drop off the children, especially the mothers, and then they would go and have coffee, and then they would look at the school, they would sort of protect the school, and the mothers can be very involved. If they see something that concerns them, they start calling or send messages, and so that's the great thing, is once again within a communal context, how different sections of the community have different roles to play, and how we are all better off if you just do the thing that you are good at and that you are interested in, which hopefully most of the time is the same thing. And so you have some people who are very interested in driving patrols and physically keeping people safe or physically arresting criminals. You have other people who can help with, if we're talking about safety at least, by responding to people who are injured and so forth. You have people who are very interested in radio communication and so forth. But this is just from a safety perspective. If you look at it from a broader communal perspective, you need to have academics, and academics should be academics. And some people are builders or engineers, and they can use their talents in that sense and make sure that we have good buildings to stay in. And so that's a great thing of any community. But I think in our sense as well, when you don't have a government, if you have enough people, it's not that difficult. Again, it goes back to natural solutions. You have to make difficult decisions all the time, but most of the time it's organic. Just let people do what they can do, and make sure that it's well organized within the context of the community, and people will naturally move towards solutions.
You have that communal nature by necessity every day, and that's something that I think we can pick up as well, and hopefully we pick up on it sooner.
Well, I can add to that. It's very important to be proactive, but it's more difficult to be proactive. Unfortunately, people tend to work on such solutions after it was necessary to do so. Like this, after the flood, then people say we need to do something. In our context, we have the farm attacks, so we often find that communities that haven't had such attacks are not very well prepared to respond once it happens. And sometimes you find that only after someone was murdered or there was an incident, then the people start organizing, when that could have been prevented if they were organized beforehand. But then we do find that when people are organized, that there's a decline in the farm attacks. If we just take this example, that a well-organized community is a safer community. And so it's unfortunate if people wait until there's an incident, until they try to do something to prevent the next incident, when one should be cautious of that and recognize that an incident might happen, and therefore you should be concerned and you should be prepared for that. But it's not just about preparing for negative incidents. It's about the underlying recognition of the fact that a flourishing community is a well-organized community, and one in which people use their talents, and that implies working towards something that is good, but also it also should imply working to ensure that we prevent bad things from happening.
The rest of the West now all of a sudden has a big open window into what's going on in South Africa, and hopefully we we see that and are inspired by that, so that we don't have to live through the same suffering to reach the same conclusions and the same community practices that you have in place right now.
Yeah, we hope so, and I mean, we're still very proud of who we are and our culture and identity, and we're very committed to find solutions in South Africa. But some help is always good, and we don't want others to solve our problems. We want to solve our own problems, and a community or a nation should solve its own problems. We have a saying in Afrikaans, a Volk red homself, which means a nation saves itself. And so this is sort of one of our slogans also. It comes from the 1930s. And that's very much what we believe. But we also believe that it's important to have friends and it's important to cooperate. And not just because we don't only think that the West should take note of what is happening in South Africa in order to prevent the bad things from happening there where other Westerners are. But we also think that as Westerners, and this is a new development for which we are very grateful, that the West is starting to realize that as the West, or as Westerners, we are under attack. And the idea of Western civilization is being threatened. And we have Westerners obviously in North America, in Europe, and in other places of the world, including South Africa. A Hungarian once said to me that South Africa is an important civilizational battlefront. And that sort of stuck with me. And I think there also needs to be solidarity within the context of the West. Not to say that the West is better or that those who aren't Westerners are enemies or something like that, but because the West is being threatened. There are certain elements who want to destroy Western civilization, and as Westerners we should also support each other. And so that is why we spoke about the Pioneer Initiative earlier, why getting support for what we are doing from outside of South Africa is very important to us. We don't want exclusively outside support, we want to fix our own problems, but in as far as people are willing to support and be involved in the solution, it's really something that we welcome.
Well, this is related to another subscriber question, which is how do you respond to Trump's executive order? And is his executive order a start? What would you add to that, or where would you go from there?
Well, the executive order is good in the sense that what he did was to sort of pick up a mirror and show to the world what's happening in South Africa, and people were able to see that. And some people are angry about that because they still want to believe this miracle rainbow nation story.
Right.
But we are really grateful for the fact that, as I said earlier, for decades, we felt that we as a nation were regarded as pariahs or sort of the naughty child that was kicked out of the household or something like that. But other than that, it's difficult to live under circumstances where there's such active discrimination against you, not just through the race laws and so forth, but also violence, politicians encouraging the violence and so forth. But then the rest of the world has this perception that it's just this incredible story and everyone's happy. And so you need to break that narrative, and that is happening. We don't think the part of the executive order that says that refugee status should be granted. We don't think that really is a solution because some people will take that up, and we've seen some people interested in moving from or immigrating from South Africa to America, but most of us will stay because we want to stay. We want to. If Joost mentioned this earlier, if you take a culture off its land, you lose the culture. And so we want to stay, and we want to be friends of the West and be part of the West and live in harmony with other nations in Africa. And we also think it's in the interest of America, not just to relocate people from South Africa to America, but to have a Western community that are friends of the West, that cooperate and trade and so forth in South Africa, because we are there. We've been there for hundreds of years. And obviously we believe that we have a right to continue to be there.
From an Orania perspective, our reaction to that was thank you for the recognition, specifically in regards to acknowledging us as Afrikaners. Not just saying there are some minorities in South Africa or, being vaguely referring to who we are, but specifically referring Afrikaners. So acknowledging that we are a people upon ourselves. We are not just a minority group or just a this or just a, something like that. We are a people, and the logical conclusion from understanding and accepting that we are a people is a people need a place. So our message to Trump, we summarized it in 3 words. First, thank you. We're not slapping away your hand. We are extremely thankful for the recognition. But in 3 words, we would rather say, help us here. If you want to do something, not necessarily, as we said, not necessarily through American taxpayer money, although investments and so on is always a good idea. Our primary concern is not to just stand and wait for handouts. We aren't a social case. We don't want to be there begging for American money, hard-earned taxpayers' money. If we were to continue in terms of a relationship, it must be beneficial to both. Now, how can a small place like Orania be to the benefit of the mightiest economy in the world? Well, we can be simply by return on investment. So if there's ever, from anyone, not just the Americans, from any country, nation, group of people with which we also want to collaborate, and so on, there must be this idea that the effort must be so that there's return on investment. I think of just about Orania's energy approach, the idea that we are working towards energy independence and the way that we made it possible to now be 50% dependent on our own resources rather than other national resources is to build it in the form of an investment, and that investment in which people from outside Orania can also invest, although they don't get decision-making abilities over our energy systems because it's of national interest to our locals, is to give them a very good 12% return on that investment. So they help us and we help them back, even if we're small. And that way of thinking complements people as equals. Now, in power or in political might or in economical might, Orania cannot be equal to the United States. But people to people, we are not beggars. We are not dependents, and we don't want to be. We want to be a free people. A free people is not a begging group of, it can't be that. It can never be that. But just to put that aside and to say then our message was help us here, and that is primarily, although investment is not excluded, it's primarily concerned with recognition. Recognizing firstly that we are a people, which happened, and it could be complemented by more such recognition. But secondly, the recognition of a legitimate pursuit to make our own decisions, to set our own destiny. In the 90s, the South African government actually, as part of the transformation process and the mitigating the change happening in South Africa, included in the constitution, and Ernst can say a bit more about this because it's his specialty, but the idea that there's in the South African constitution, very liberal constitution, there is an included part stating that cultures have the right to self-determination. Very, very specifically, it was left very short and very vague and so on, but there is that right to be taken and to be built upon. and it's a legitimate pursuit. If more governments can acknowledge that, whether that be the US or other governments or just other groups, and say, well, the South African government said something. They put a statement, Article 235 of the South African Constitution. Let's get more acknowledgement for this. Then Afrikaners can set their destiny, and they can pursue their dreams of being in control of their own political discourse, working towards self-governance, working towards self-determination and things like that.
I want to touch on something that you said just quickly about the investments. And I find this very exciting and interesting and new. It's not just a matter of governments investing in projects and other governments, but you also said that individuals can make investments. Could you talk a little bit more about those opportunities? How can people, even just individuals, become members of Orania from a supporting standpoint, and also take advantage of this investment opportunity and help you grow your power structure?
There's multiple ways to actually support Orania, of which one facet is just, donating on a very small basis. People can become members of our movement, which is like 50 Rand, which is like what, $2, $3 maybe a month, which is like a minimum just to support the cause. Obviously it can be more, but the larger amount of support actually comes through various channels of investment. We created the Orania Grow Fund. We created multiple infrastructure opportunities which help people invest in specifically apartments to help people settle there. We've created the City Building Fund and so on, but the most, I think, popular one, and maybe even the most important one, because we have something called load shedding in South Africa, which is basically rolling blackouts. The monopolized central energy provider cannot anymore, after lots of corruption, mismanagement, and the inability to maintain the basic infrastructure, they cannot deliver enough energy for the entire country to function. So now you get placed on kind of a schedule when you have power and when not. And at worst, it's up to 8, 10, 12 hours per day without electricity for specific places. Yeah, so everyone is suffering. Currently, that's toned a bit back because the private investment in solar in South Africa is just so phenomenal that it's buying some time for the national energy provider Eskom. But this weekend there was load shedding again in South Africa. So then you just don't have power, and you can understand. I don't think Westerners understand the effect that has on the economy. It is a death sentence to an economy. So we had for 3 years load shedding without interruption. 3 years of load shedding without it stopping. It's been going since 2010, 2009, but for the past 3 years, it continuously there was every week there was a schedule.
Why is it so bad?
Incompetence, corruption, mismanagement,
and also lack of planning. So one part of it is they had to build more power stations because the population is growing. Another part of it is the existing power stations aren't maintained, and so that's another part of it is corruption. The money that is allocated to maintaining the power stations and so forth is stolen.
On an industrial level, it's hard to quantify the amount of money stolen through Eskom.
Yeah, it's
someone did a sum
unquantifiable
for like the past 10 years or something. So many million rands were stolen per day. It was like infathomable. It's very, very big. Every day they just took the total amount of money that's lost through corruption and just divided
which
it.
Which is billions of dollars. Yeah.
It was like millions of rands every day.
And the government leaders don't see how this is a problem, or they can't.
Well, some of them are involved with it. That's the problem. Some of them are involved with the corruption, and others, those who aren't involved, I don't know how many are not involved, but it's not politically, your prospects aren't very good if you take a stance against corruption. Or if you can take a stance, you can say it's bad, but if you actually try to do something as a politician in South Africa, you just lose support and you get kicked out.
You undermine your own friends.
It's disincentivized to ensure it. If you're the president and you make sure that corrupt politicians go to jail, you're not going to have a long political life in South Africa. It's an oligarchy, that's what it is.
Yeah, but just on the more positive side, it forced us to fast track our plan. So Orania's goals from the get-go was always energy independence, because if you don't have energy independence, you don't have political independence. If you don't control your own energy, someone else controls you. It's the same with other things like economy,
power.
banks, whatever. But in our context, we had to fast track it. So the strategy was to invest in generational capacity to generate power, but we were forced to fast track storage as well. So the community bought it's a very large investment of almost 50 million rands to set the infrastructure for a battery. Now Orania is the only community in South Africa on a complete level. There's many people who are individualized energy solutions, but on a communal level, Orania is the only community that I'm aware of that can survive load shedding, that goes through it. When the power gets shut down, the community's economy keeps going because the battery just carries it. So we also generate enough power to actually feed back into the grid, selling it back to the national energy provider, making a profit from that, which grows our options. So what we did is the very brilliant and determined guys at Orasol, which is our energy provider, went out and said, okay, let's plan this thing from the ground up. If we can generate energy, this is kind of, and we sell it to the community at normal rates, this is kind of what we need in financing. And we can pay back that financing with the income. So you need to make a profit. Many things in Orania, also security, is commercialized, almost made locked into a capitalist system. Yeah, privatized, but with the it's not privatized. It's still communal. For example, security is still part of the town council's specific efforts to keep Orania safe, but it's got a capitalist venture to make sure that it makes enough money to sustain itself. It doesn't really make a profit, but it can sustain itself, which in itself is a miracle. So the security and the same with energy. You have to think like a businessman while implementing it in a communal fashion. So that it's to the effort of the community, not, or to the advantage of the community, not some shareholder who just want to maximize profits. So it's a very, very tough shift to make in your mind. On the one hand, maximum profits, otherwise it won't sustain itself. On the other hand, the goal is not revenue, the goal is not profit, the goal is the community. So on the one hand, super business minded, on the other hand, super people minded. It's two tough things to marry with one another, but it's necessary. So the energy thing was built from the ground up. People invested, although we didn't give any decision-making rights to the investors. Why? We don't want people sitting far away from Orania deciding our future in their best interest. No, it's to the best interest of the community. So you can't buy with money decision-making power. However, you can invest and get a good return on investment, which incentivizes it to invest. But the people stay in control. So the only two shareholders with decision-making powers in our energy system is the people, the town council, representing the people, and then the farming community, represented by their board of directors, because they are also a big user of energy to pump water to farm.
We have another question about your economy that also ties back into something that you touched on earlier. When we were talking about safety, you said you have two generals, general distance and general owned labor. And when discussing your economy, I think it's important that we define what owned labor means, in your context. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that and how your economy survives, in a different way than the rest of South Africa?
It's a conversation for an entire day almost, because labor is such an integral part of Orania. So in Afrikaans, the word is volks eie arbeid. Labor being done by your own people. Why? Okay, multiple reasons. Firstly, I think it's maybe not the most popular one, or the most known one, but let's start with the theological angle on this. So we believe doing your own work is in honor of God. Building things, creating things, maintaining things, cleaning things, taking care of the area around you is part of the cultural command in Genesis to live, to work, and to preserve. So firstly, that's very important, and one shouldn't make it off as nothing. It's an important part of why we do it. The second thing is to say that we do our own labor because of the past, to say that never again can someone accuse us of the fact that they were misused or exploited to create our future for us. We will do it ourselves. In Orania, you will find all the maintenance, all the kind of janitor kind work, cleaning toilets, building houses, maintaining gardens. It's all done by Afrikaners, which might sound normal in many European countries, but it's not normal in Africa. In Africa, that kind of way of having 1 or 2 or 3 people in your house, cleaning it, maintaining it, tending to your garden, is still very much alive, and it's something that we need to learn Afrikaners. So that's the second thing. We're not exploiting anyone, and we're living in justice with everyone else, all the other peoples of South Africa and Africa, because they are not getting misused, and no one can claim that they were misused in building our future. We do it ourselves. Third one is obviously demographics. Whoever does the work, and there's a very stark warning, stark reminder for the US and Europe, if you're going to import people to do your so-called dirty work, your menial labor for you on an industrial scale, bringing them in from wherever, whether that be North Africa or Mexico or whatever, and you just allocate certain work for certain people, it's going to have a vast effect on your demographic realities. And so some European countries have to do it just to get enough taxpayers to maintain the social security of a generation that's aging and aging and aging. So to get new people in, just to do the baseline kind of tax-paying stuff to maintain social security, that's also an issue. But specifically in Orania, we understand that demographics is destiny and labor dictates demographics. So if you don't do your own work, you are always in a situation that whoever does the work, they will be the majority. And yeah, it's challenging because we handicap ourselves. We take away potential revenue in order for certain social advantages to stay an Afrikaner community. Yeah, so it's very important to think in those terms. Finally, I would say that actually I had a thing the other day. An Austrian guy visited Orania, and he asked about the same thing, labor. And he asked me, okay, how does this work now, you know? And I said, oh, this guy's not going to get it because he's from Austria. He's probably used to the idea of own labor. It's very European and so on. And I tried to explain demographics and labor and so on. I said, oh, okay, now I get it. And he maybe summarized it in the best way that I've ever heard. If you use other people's labor, foreign labor as we call it, if you use cheap labor, you privatize the revenue. So you yourself in your business can become rich much quicker, but you socialize the cost. The cost of not doing your own labor, it gets very, very high socially. And I think you can see it in any major city in the US. You can see it anywhere where immigration has been quite big and so on. If you don't do your own work, someone else will dictate your demographics and your realities. So the short-term comfort is very high. You can have a fantastic life. Someone from a third world country come and do all your dirty work for you, keep your house clean, tend to your kids, tend to your garden, tend to your business. You can have a very comfortable life, and all you do is manage everything. You can become very rich, and on a short term, you can have a very good life, but your people will suffer in the long term.
Do you support or know about similar projects similar to Orania and these intentional communities in white majority countries?
We know about some projects, yes, there are initiatives. Quickly, from the top of my mind, well, just to put it this way, in just January of 2025, we had 8 visits from international groups in Orania, of which I think 5 or 6 were people either already starting a community or planning to start one. There was a guy from Texas, which is originally from a European country, deciding where he should start such an initiative. There are people from Tennessee with a similar project. There are the Return to the Land community, of which there's also videos on Orania's YouTube about. They interacted with us, did a bit of a study tour. We get lots of questions from the UK and from Belgium and from that's the ones I could think of quickly who's actually interested in starting something similar. There are many other people who just come to visit, but those are the countries with people actually wanting to start something. Yeah.
Are there any plans for a formal declaration of independence? I don't know if I can ask you this on screen, but if I can't, we can edit it out. But
So we believe independence is not declared; it's built. So for the last more than 30 years, every day is a mini declaration of independence. Every day working in Orania, I always say people don't understand what goes into it just to build a speed bump in the road. In Orania, doing it with own labor, with our own funds, with our own initiative, planning it ourselves, executing something as simple as a speed bump in the road, as simple as a small traffic circle, as simple as driving your kids to a school, which is an Afrikaner school, which is not funded by the state, which is built from the all of that. It's declarations of independence. People should stop thinking in singular terms. The risk of thinking of a declaration of independence is the snap moment of which we spoke earlier. There is no such thing as just an instant in time when everything is solved. So freedom is built. Freedom is not declared. Many people want to declare freedom and then build it. Orania says that's nonsense. You have to build freedom and then declare it. So the form of which Orania's future might look like, Professor Karel Boshoff, one of the founders of Orania, always said, federal if it can, sovereign if it must. Depending on the situation in Africa, in South Africa, and the political situation, the worldwide situation, we know what we want to achieve. We as Afrikaners love the idea of a republic. But what can we do? What is possible? What is necessary? And what is required? And we are pragmatic in that sense. So we will continue building Orania and the realities around it with small declarations of independence.
Are there any opportunities right now in Orania if someone were to learn the Afrikaner language who has a background in semiconductor and law? Asking for friends. This one's for you, monitor. Listen carefully.
So we always encourage people to come visit Orania, to come see for themselves. Orania is not as simple and as unnuanced and as just the small paradise as people might think. It's a tough community, stubborn people, stubborn realities and so on. Come visit Orania, come see. I think I always tell people from other groups in South Africa who say, well, can I come live there because I speak Afrikaans? Afrikaans is a small piece of the puzzle. Our entire identity is not just our language or just the color of our skin or just our religion. It is that and many more things. So there's always economic opportunities. If you're willing to do what is required to build Orania and to survive on your own feet, but it's not as easy as people think. You can't just integrate into a group just like that as well. I guess it's possible, but there's no quick fix, and people must really be wary of thinking that. So I encourage we've had in Orania from American Marxist black supremacists who wanted to have a separate state in the US, to German fascists, to Russian communists, to libertarians, to South Africans just fed up with the crime, and we've spoken to all of them. Come see. I says, come see.
Well, this has been really, really interesting. Thank you so much to both of you. I know it's been just a delight to brainstorm with you guys, and I know our audience is going to absolutely love it. So people who have made it this far in the interview, they are definitely going to want to learn more about your organization. So how can they go from here directly to your website or your social media and find out more about your projects and support?
Well, firstly, thank you for the interview and also for very insightful questions. And also from the viewers, it was really great talking about sort of the bigger picture issues, but then also combine that with the practical side of it. So it was a lot of fun. So thank you for that. In terms of practical support, maybe the easiest is always a website. So in terms of this Pioneer initiative, which has a bit of a more, you could say, macro political focus, the website is pioneerinitiative.org.za. So .org.za is the abbreviation for South Africa. And yes, and we'd love to get as many people as we can involved with that.
Fantastic.
In terms of Orania, there are a multitude of options. People can just, depending on age, they can go to our Facebook page if they're interested in that and go to Orania. Just Orania is our Facebook. Our Instagram is Orania Beweging. Beweging is the Afrikaans word for movement. And both of us also on X. So Ernst Roets and Joost Strydom, people can find us there. And then www.orania.co.za is our webpage at the Orania movement. So guys can come and check that out. There's a lot of information and email links if they want to email us. We are overwhelmed with questions and stuff like that. But the moment we get the opportunity, we answer them. I think that's it. We also have a YouTube, just Orania Beweging, Orania movement in Afrikaans. So people can check that out as well. There's a lot of good content on there.
Well, I hope you learned as much as I did. If you like our work, please share widely on social media and consider supporting us at whitepaperspolicy.org/donate. In particular, I'd like to thank Jay and T for making this interview possible. Our policy research will always remain free because of our commitment to our people. But subscribers get to chat directly with me and the White Papers team, comment on articles, suggest guests and topics, and submit questions for interviews like these. Thanks for watching.
Watch this.